Donald Trump's tariff policy has roiled the stock market, confused allies, and increased talk of a recession. But my next guest argues that Democrats aren't exactly doing themselves any favors when they condemn tariffs outright, arguing the party's anti-tariff absolutism risks putting the Democrats even further out of touch with the hardworking people who used to be the lifeblood of the party. Joining us now, Pennsylvania Congressman Chris Deluzio. I'm really happy to have you on this, Congressman. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
So part of the issue, I think, is part of the reason why Donald Trump was elected is all of this growing and spiraling, snowballing anger and angst from NAFTA. I mean, you experience it certainly in your district. And instead of, I guess, understanding it, you argue that the Democrats are pretending like it doesn't exist. How should they approach it?
Well, I don't, let's be clear, not all Democrats. And I think to miss what's gone on in places like the Rust Belt, where we saw bad trade deals, bad policies destroy good, solid, hard jobs around manufacturing, to ignore that is a mistake. And to look at Donald Trump's trade policy, it's been chaotic, it's been reckless, it's rattled markets. All of that is true. But to see some Democrats or Democrats at all reject out of hand that tariffs ought to be a tool, I think that's a mistake. Tariffs should be a tool alongside industrial policy, pro-worker policies, negotiating better trade deals. I want to see Democrats have a, frankly, really aggressive and direct approach to revitalizing American manufacturing, standing with communities like mine in Western Pennsylvania, and using tariffs where it makes sense against countries like communist China that break the rules around steel, for instance. That's where tariffs make sense to me.
Give me a little bit more on that. If you were arguing for a tariff, what would you be arguing?
Well, look, let's do communist China and steel. They've engaged in heavy subsidies of their industry. They've dumped excess supply in countries like the United States. They've tried to get around our tariffs and rules going through other third-party countries. They've even been abusing, not just in steel, but other materials, abusing NAFTA 2.0 to circumvent trade rules and go in through Mexico to get import access or export access to the United States. Right? So we have to have enforcement and stricter use of trade law, and tariffs are part of that with a country like China. The other side of this, when Donald Trump's administration says they're going to use reciprocal tariffs, tariffs alone will not fix our trade imbalance with a country like Mexico. We've had duty-free access to Mexican markets since NAFTA, a lousy deal, and yet what's happened? Our trade deficit with Mexico has ballooned. You got to go right to the heart of a country like Mexico that keeps their worker pay artificially low, that blocks any sort of unionization, and tariffs alone won't fix that. You got to get back to the negotiating table on NAFTA 2.0, get a better trade deal, address the issues around worker pay, make them pay for their pollution in Mexico so they don't get this free access into our markets.
President Biden tried to address some of the lack of manufacturing in this country and the fact that we're reliant on other countries by passing the CHIPS and Science Act, looking to make more of those high-powered chips here in the United States. The problem that he faced is that it took a long time for that money to be put into action. It's still taking a long time for that money to be put into action. How do Democrats address the speed issue? How do they show the American public that when they say they're going to do something and they do it, it actually delivers results in the near term?
Yeah, that's about getting better at governing. And we have to say that was a failure to not get money out to communities and into projects. Bureaucracy cannot be in the way of us succeeding for the American people. Processes and systems cannot be in the way of us succeeding for the American people. And Democrats ought to learn that lesson. And that's why I come back to tariffs are just one piece of this. We need good industrial policy, and it can't just be a law that looks good on paper. You got to have people in office who can get it done, cut through red tape where it doesn't make sense, and actually execute on this stuff. You got to have the governance to back up the policy ideas.
How do you cut through that red tape? Because a lot of the places that have the most red tape are democratically controlled.
Yeah, I frankly think too many mayors and governors are learning this lesson right now and seeing that they've become more unpopular. I look what's happening in Pennsylvania, where my governor, Josh Shapiro, who is popular, is cutting through a lot of red tape in Pennsylvania that we may not need, getting rid of things like college degree requirements for hiring folks. Right? We should look for places to open up opportunity for people where government might be imposing rules that don't work. Democrats should be part of doing that, no doubt. And I think that's in sharp contrast to what we're seeing from Mr. Musk in this DOGE outfit, which is looking to slash Social Security and veterans benefits and so much else that we expect our government to deliver on.
One of the criticisms on the promise to bring manufacturing home is that it's just a promise that doesn't actually work. You can bring back a manufacturing plant, and yes, it might save 1,000 jobs, but you're going to lose 75,000 other jobs because down the line, you're going to lose people who were able to support themselves off the lower prices for steel before the tariffs were put into place. And this is just a graph of what Donald Trump's tariffs on steel were able to add in terms of jobs, but what they ultimately cost in terms of jobs by 2019. What do you say to that argument?
Well, two things. One, this is why you can't just have tariffs alone as a trade policy. You've got to have domestic investments and incentives to get more manufacturing. You got to have pro-worker policies. All these things go together. The other thing is I don't have to make up hypotheticals. I know what 30, 40 years of bad trade deals and neoliberal economics has meant for this country. We've got costs of goods that are too high. We saw the problems with our supply chain stretched all over the planet. That proposal, that trade, that we would have cheaper goods and get rid of the good, solid jobs, it hasn't worked out. And people in my part of the world in Western Pennsylvania and lots of places like us, we know that. And so I don't have to make up what might happen. I know what it was, and we know what it was to see bad trade deals and a decision to offshore and kick our manufacturing jobs overseas, chasing the cheapest labor and the weakest environmental rules. It has not worked. We got to do something differently in this country.
Congressman Chris Deluzio, thank you very much for joining us.